Was there any other passages you wanted to go over today?
You know,
You
well, the
said
thing is,
keep listening. I'm happy to. I have another question that I one. This is one of
let's
those.
go. Yeah, let's hear it because I mean, I have topics and
Okay.
things that we can discuss, but I really want to hear your questions, and then maybe something that I have here will relate to the question, or maybe we
Okay.
can, I can
Yeah.
find something for next time. So let's just go straight
Okay.
to your questions, and then
So
we'll go from there.
it's kind of question. It's a question, doubt, and issue all
Okay.
in one. I think um, that needs to be cleared. At some point. At some point, because of various things in my life, I began to look at life from a very secular point of view, even while being, even while holding spiritual views and Buddhist views and Buddhist teachings and other teachings like that. I kind of this is sort of back in the 90s, was kind of both a Taoist and a Buddhist, type of thing. Maybe mixed with some other natural, nature-based spirituality type stuff. But anyway, I began to view life from a secular point of view, becoming very skeptical about a lot of things in life. And again, there was, without getting too much into the specifics of where that came from, it's just the fact is I began to become very skeptical about a lot of things, all aspects of life, in fact. Okay. Which kind of, in a lot of ways with Buddhism, it fit with Buddhism because, you're questioning your own mind, you're questioning, what you believe is reality, you're questioning your perceptions, so it fit in that sense, with that. But there was a point where, and I also probably about the same time I started looking into Eastern philosophy, I was also started to look into Western philosophy. So I have a lot of that, along with learning about the Eastern philosophies and, the Taoic, Confucianism and Taoism and Buddhism. And, I also was learning about, the sort of rational Western tradition of philosophy, both before and then during university years, all of this actually. And at some point that became very strong, that part of it, questioning claims, looking at things from a very rational, critical thought type of view, very secular. And so pretty much nothing survived that. Except Buddhism.
Very little does.
Except Buddhism. Buddhism is about the only thing that survived that as that grew in me. That skepticism, cynicism, and that just sort of rational questioning, I say rational in quotes, because what we think is, our great vaunted rational thought, from a Buddhist perspective is pretty laughable, that we think we can, that with all of our delusions, obscurations, attachments, aversions, blind passions, ignorance, that we think, I can rationally assess all this stuff. I know that, I really know that in myself, but it's still there, that questioning of things, and that mindset sometimes takes over and wants to level everything, including Buddhism. It wants to try to that part of my monkey mind. Let's put it that way, and that's how I see it. That part of my monkey mind, one of the monkeys, or a whole legion of them, wants to level everything, level everything, including the Buddha Dharma. And question, like I would any other of the 95 non-Buddhist ways.
Right.
It never gets too far before I come to my senses.
Yeah.
But it starts to go, and that's there. That's a big one. And
yeah.
I haven't really discussed that with anyone. A little bit,
Yeah.
Paul Roberts. I touched on it a little bit with Paul Roberts in a couple of letters, back and forth emails that I had, but never really. I think at the time it was too much for me to try to keep explaining, what I mean?
Yeah.
It, and because it became kind of, well, you're either materialist or you're not materialist. And I'm like, well, actually, from a scientific point of view, if you take science as far as it will go, you lose that whole material. It becomes Buddhism, basically. If you really take science the implications of science as far as it will go, it becomes Buddhism without the moral aspect of it. But the you start to go, okay, it's impermanent, it's it's interdependent, it's all the stuff. Like, that's Buddhism. So actually, like, a scientific point of view isn't necessarily, I personally don't think it's materialist. But anyway, coming back to so there's that part of me. And so that's a very big one, like the other one we talked about and discussed. Whether, that the last time or last two times, that's a big one that keeps arising at times, sometimes more frequently than other times, but it's a very strong mental occurrence, let's say.
Yeah.
It's a very strong one that I grab onto.
Oh yeah. Well, it's not.
It usually
it's
goes
no
with
surprise.
A sense of hopelessness and and just disgust with everything. And I basically become Rust Cole. I don't know if you've ever seen True Detective.
Okay.
Or it's basically I become a total philosophical pessimist about everything.
Yeah, kind of a nihilist sort of outlook.
But because I'm a Buddhist, it keeps me from the nihilism, if you see what I mean. Because I'm a Buddhist, I don't go into nihilism. Might be fatalistic, might be totally pessimistic. And to be fair, if as Jodo Shinshu Buddhists, we're not hugely optimists, are we, about Mappo? We're not really optimistic about people's ability in the in this declining kalpa of period of Mappo as to what human beings can actually accomplish with the Dharma or anything else.
Right.
And it go very well. But anyway, so anyway, that's a big part. That rational, sort of pessimistic, skeptical, secular, mental state, mental occurrence,
right,
is very strong. And I always fear, I always fear it going into, is that slandering the Dharma? Even though I'm not telling anybody, but is that, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is that, but even though I'm not saying it, I'm not spreading this, propagating it to other people. In my mind, these, things are arising.
Yeah.
And sometimes I let it get a hold of me, and go with it. And I go, oh, I mean, like I said, it doesn't take very long before I realize how ridiculous it is.
Yeah.
But it's just very strong and reoccurring. And
well, I definitely don't think it would count as slandering the Dharma. I don't think I would call it that. I would say it's definitely a doubt, but it's not. It's like a doubt that's common to us all because, like you. I mean, we who live in this, age where a lot of inquiry, whether it's scientific or philosophical, it's a very skeptical age, right? And it's not just true of the West. I mean, it's also true of Eastern countries, Japan. A lot of people I've, met people who are, Jodo Shinshu Buddhists in Japan who sometimes ask me like, about church attendance declining in the US because, membership of temples in Japan is also declining. And it's all connected to this skepticism and the fact that a lot of young people nowadays just don't really have any interest in religion whatsoever, whatever it is, right? And I think like you, I mean, I was raised in a very fundamentalist Protestant kind of environment that made me question a lot, what I was being told. And I got to this point where I was just, like you said, you sort of question everything, right?
Exactly. It's like the lone gun, bumper sticker on there.
Yeah.
On their event. I don't know if you ever saw that show. Anyway, the question everything bumper sticker was a big. It was like yeah. So anyway,
question the questions, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
So it's something that is just part of, the time, the era we live in, and it's a part of the, education that we receive and so on and so forth. And I do think I mean, there are certainly aspects of, Buddhism and the Buddhist teaching and Dharma and so on that have to be, made sense of by we who live in this modern world, right? So like when we're talking about, traditional Buddhist cosmology, for example, with the description of mountains and four continents and then Mount Sumeru in the middle, and then, the sun goes around and around like this and so on. I mean, that description of the world is not quite like the scientific, world that we know of today. So, and actually there's an interesting, in Japan, there's actually a university museum in Kyoto, and it's affiliated with Ryukoku University, which is the major Jodo Shinshu university. They have a museum, and you've probably heard of the company Toshiba. I'm guessing, maybe. It's a Japanese company.
Sorry, I have. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got distracted.
Well, this one of their exhibits was the Japanese company Toshiba, like probably.
I'm still listening. Bear with me a moment. I'm still listening.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I just let my father-in-law in, so just please keep talking.
Okay. And in this museum, they have there are two astrolabes, you could call them, or not. I guess it's an astrolabe, but like mechanical models of the universe. And they were both built by the founder of Toshiba. And one of these models was of the modern scientific heliocentric universe, right? The solar system, like the Earth and all of that.
Yeah.
And then the other one, it was identical in design, but the other one was of the Buddhist cosmos. And it was really interesting to me because you had, this Japan was opening to the West. People were being exposed to all of this modern, but it's kind of interesting how like they made these models and set those two pictures of the world kind of like side by side. You could like look at both of them.
Yeah.
But I mean, I say that to say like, there's a degree to which there are aspects of the Buddhist teaching that we have to. It's not that we just throw them out, like say, well, this doesn't apply anymore, but we have to kind of like interpret them and decide, how in what way is this true? It's not like it's not true or it is true, but in what way does this, with our modern knowledge of the way the earth looks or whatever, right? Because
the way I look at that is that when I look at the whole modern approach to secular scientific, so-called scientific approach to things, I'll just say so-called to all those, so-called modern, so-called secular, so-called scientific, quote in quotes, all of those. First of all those things, all those approaches to life are coming from, where is it coming from? It's coming from the human mind, human culture, human, it's still humans that are doing the science. It's still humans that are interpreting the data. It's the scientific data. It's still humans that have all their ego and all their delusions and all their ignorance and all their attachments and aversions, obscurations and blind passions and everything else. And that's all going into them making the, do you know what I mean? That's all there. And then and it's still human beings that are delivering that those so-called scientific truths to everyone, and human beings who are looking at it and going, oh yeah, oh look at that, that's got to be true, yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like through all of our ignorance, our like profound ignorance too of Mappa, like we're not just ignorant, like we're in the worst age of humans for deludedness. So like we're interpreting that, like, so I don't, the whole thing of trust the science. To me, that's when people say that, it's laughable to me. It's literally, do you know what I mean? Because there's the ego, like so much with what in the science, so-called scientific process, it's egos involved, people trying to get published, and they do whatever, they do all the same kind of corrupt, whatever they got to do to get their little position or get to advance. It's all corrupt. Do you know what I mean? So when somebody says trust the science, first of all, like it's just laughable.
First you have to interpret the science, right?
Yeah, it's just,
and it's people who do the interpretation.
Same goes for the secular viewpoint, so-called secular viewpoint. Yeah, it's full of all that. First of all the cluelessness, the karmic cluelessness of human beings. We're just seeing things through our total ignorance and blind passions and everything else. So, and we're making all kinds of assumptions. So it might as well just be like the secular perspective might as well just be blind faith, because everything that people think is a secular position or secular view of the world, it might as well just be they're more blind faith than me as a Buddhist. They're more totally I don't think as a Buddhist I have blind faith at all. I think our faith is based on actual, the teachings of the Buddha. And I mean, I think the Buddhas and all the Buddhas and, and Dharma masters and are the smartest people in the room, as far as, you know what I mean? So but it's not, Buddhism isn't about, blind faith at all. As we were talking about in the last session about what Shakyamuni said to the Kalama people. But but that secular view to me, so-called secular view or modernist view of things is one of the worst forms of blind faith, because there's so many assumptions and it's so arrogant and clueless. So that's why I call them all like so-called scientific, so-called modernist, so-called secular. So that's all with me too, and that's look at it. That's how I come back and go, okay, remember, like that, and I'm sure Amit is helping me with that. I'm sure, do you know what I mean? But that's kind of how I view those things when I'm in a good, and even when I go into that, the mental state that I just described, that sort of pessimistic, rational, so-called rational, questioning everything mode, I still have that attitude toward those, what I just described, of like, that's all full of it too. Those approaches are all completely full of it. In addition to my current mental state of, thinking I can, question everything and come to some, you know what I mean? And eventually it goes in a pattern like that where I go, well, I'm not going to get anywhere with this anyway. Because I realize, like,
well, and
horrible state of mind too. It's a horrible state of mind as far as emotionally as well. So that's another reason it doesn't last very long. I can't sustain it, and I come back. I'm so relieved when I come back to the immediate karma and just focus on that, or I turn my thoughts toward Amida, or you know what I mean. Anyway, but it's a big
I mean, it's a huge question, and let's definitely address this, in ongoing sessions, right? Because I mean, it is, we do, as modern people, we have this sort of way, this skeptical outlook, which I don't think is a bad thing per se, but I do think there are aspects of the Dharma and Buddhism where you kind of have to sort of work out for yourself, like, how this makes sense to you, right? Like, how do you relate to this certain aspect of the Dharma and so on. So but that's also kind of like something you have to sort of work out on yourself. I will say that even Western philosophy is certainly not all bad, and there's a lot of great insights. And in fact, there's a really
some of it that's quite Buddhist, actually. There's some of it that comes to very similar conclusions of teachings of Buddhism, very similar, or at least analogous to, I would say,
right.
Some of going back, ancient and in more modern times as well. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm just going to say there's unfortunately, he actually passed away a couple years ago, but there was a Jodo Shinshu priest who lived in Osaka in Japan, and he was a very, very definitely a person of Shinjin, and a very his writing on Jodo Shinshu is really good stuff. But he was also a philosopher, and he had the knowledge of like Western philosophy as well as Eastern philosophy, and he wrote a series of books about Shinran's teaching and Wasan in the hymns of Shinran, and he makes a lot of references and analogies to Western philosophy. Like, he brings it up and says, well, this is similar to, and so on. So it's a useful tool, I think, especially for people who have like a Western background, and are coming to Jodo Shinshu from not so much an Eastern perspective, but like you and me, they're coming from a European perspective or an American perspective. So I mean, modernity and tradition, and how do we as relatively skeptical, modern people make sense of some aspects? I mean, that's definitely all stuff we can discuss. I think it's a great conversation.
It's not so much because underlyingly, I can envision, because I have a great imagination. One of the things I'm very grateful for, of being a human being, to have a human birth, the rare human birth, to have the mind and the imagination that I have. When I read the sutras, when I read the teaching, when I read about these things, I can see it. I can see things happening, as it's literally as it's told, or at least a version of it, I should say. I can't see it as
right.
Teachings is the Buddha's trying to convey it, but I can visualize, within my limitations, I have a good imagination. So I can, like the things that happen in the Lotus Sutra, I can like see that happening, or the things that happen in the Sri Lankan Sutras, I can see that occurring, the whole, I can, and from a standpoint of Buddhist teachings themselves, with the way that it's both, things are both conscious, it's both consciousness and worlds, actual
right.
It's realms are, it's consciousness and realms. So within that sort of teaching that, these are actual realms and consciousness, this consciousness resulting from the consciousness of beings that inhabit them collectively and individually, I can see that in the Buddhist teaching that, that will happen in consciousness. That's, do you know what I mean? Based on the Buddhist teachings about consciousness and how that works, how it eludes itself, and how it can see, how it can create, it actually creates things. You know what I mean? I can see I can see the most fantastic depictions of things in the sutras as that's really how it happened on, in that sense, in that realm of consciousness. I can see that literally that's how it happened. That's what I can look at it that way. But I know obviously that's just my limited way of so you see what I mean? So I mean, from the Buddhist teaching, it makes it very easy to accept all those things, because the Buddhist teaching itself gives you that way to say, I can interpret, it's both a literal thing happening, and the Buddha is teaching, it's a teaching way of teaching, and it's, do you know what I mean? And just leave it at that. And
there's multiple layers.
Multiple layers, and in my limited capacity, there's only certain amount of that I can see, and So the Buddha teaching gives me that, just totally already gives me a way to deal with that whole quote unquote scientific, scientific skeptical age, scientific. The great Western mind. Like it's, you know what I mean? First of all, that's laughable. Second of all, the Buddhist teaching gives me a way to just, I can buy that. I can totally see that. I can totally believe that. It's not hard. Do you see
it's not contradictory.
Within the framework of the Buddhist teachings themselves, make it very easy to say, that's it. That's how it's, do you see what I mean? So, and I'm grateful for that, and I'm sure that's Amita's work that I'm able to even think that and say that, and the good past causes and things. But anyway, so we'll talk more. Definitely talk more. Go ahead.
Yes, definitely.
Finish what you were going to say. Because we're.
Well, I think we've been going for an hour, but I just wanted to say, no, I certainly see where you're coming from with the, how do we kind of deal with the skeptical, our skeptical mind, and then in relation
skeptical mind.
So, that's something we certainly can and should, I think, discuss. And then with our next meeting, I do have some topics that are kind of related to, what we've been discussing. So your question about, hearing, I think we've discussed, and I think you've kind of reached a satisfactory, with Linya Shonin's. But then we can probably discuss a bit more about, the nature of Amida, especially as it relates to like your question about the 5 wisdom Buddhas and sort of, how does this all relate to? We could certainly talk about that.
The Adi Buddha, 5 wisdom Buddhas, eternal Buddha, and then, Shakyamuni as the eternal Buddha, and as Amida, as a Nirmanakaya of Amida, so we definitely need to
and then also
although I feel more comfortable with it, I feel from what we've discussed and from me literally finally really asking the question and then really discussing it, I feel more comfortable with that question now.
Good.
I feel more comfortable with it. It's not, I wouldn't say it's a resolved, it might never be resolved. I mean, in the sense of like, okay, I can let that kind of go now.
Right.
I don't really need that anymore. Let's just get on with the, with the
but I do think we should talk about, because it does relate to, the nature, the question of who and what, is Amida Buddha, and, how does this relate to Shinjin? And then also talking about Shinjin itself, what does Shinran say about the way in which Amida gives Shinjin to beings, to us? So that is another huge, I think, a topic that would be helpful as well. So, and then any questions that you have from your reading, please, jot them down and or send them, and we can definitely discuss those as well.
Next time on Discussions with Kyokan.
To be continued.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Again, really appreciate all your time and preparation, your willingness to discuss this with me and share your knowledge and faith of the Dharma. And
I was surprised when you mentioned EQ and the same passage from Nishoni. That was quite a surprise to me. So it was great.
Excellent. I'm glad.
All right.
Take care. Namo Amida Butsu.
Namo Amida Butsu.
See you next time.
Take care.